G'day all, back for another sim racing video. Sim racing, obviously enjoying a little bit of a boom at the moment due to the shutdown that's going on around the world. And a lot of people investing in new gear at the moment as well. Seems to be a lot of people sort of spending a lot more time on the sim, obviously, and taking the time and money to invest in some new gear, which is exactly what I've done. I've upgraded to a Fanatec DD1 direct drive wheel and also the V3 pedals. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to try and answer the question that a lot of people have and a lot of people want to know the answer to before they actually spend the money, because it's not cheap to upgrade to this type of stuff, especially if you don't know you're going to get any tangible gains out of it. So I thought I'd try and answer that question. There seems to be a lot of videos out there that sort of, I guess, claim in the title to be answering that question about whether it's actually going to provide you a tangible benefit or not. And then, they sit there and they say the word fidelity a lot and they never actually answer the question. So that's what we're going to try and do today, is do a back-to-back test and answer the question, is it going to make you faster? Is it going to be worth the investment, or is it just a luxury item that doesn't really change much? So before we start, a couple of disclaimers, I suppose. So the reason that I decided to invest in some additional gear is that I'm somebody who's very, very reliant on feel and feedback and that kind of thing. And I always have felt as though I've missed that seat of the pants feel that you get in a real car in a sim. And I do always feel as though that holds me back. So logic would sort of dictate that the better feel that I'm able to get, the better I'm able to reproduce that, the better feel I'm going to have, the better results I'm going to have. Now, that's not the same for everyone. There are lots of people out there that are just not reliant on it at all. You could give them a Xbox game controller and they'd probably be every bit as quick. I know people who just run what I used to run, very cheap wheels, and they are really, really fast. So, it's different things for different people, I suppose. So that's the first disclaimer, is that I bought this probably because it's something that I think is going to specifically benefit me and what I'm looking for in terms of the feedback that I get and the feel that I get and how reliant I am on that. So, and I guess I just wanted to probably go through a little bit about the test itself that I did. So just before I packed up my trusty old G27 and disconnected everything, I went out and I did 9 timed laps at the Kyalami circuit on Assetto Corsa, 1967 Kyalami, in the Porsche 935 from the DRM mod, which I've covered in an earlier video. And if I remember, I'll put a little card up the top with a link to that one if you want to see it. So with this test, I decided to pick the track because I was familiar with the layout, so I wasn't spending a lot of time learning the track. And I also picked the Porsche 935 because it's a car with no electronic assistance. There's nothing to really dull that sort of feel. It's a brutal 1980s turbo car, so very, I guess, agricultural by modern standards. No assists in it. Feel is going to be very, very important. So I guess I'm trying to pick a car and track combination that's going to accentuate any findings that this test is going to have. So what I've done, while I'm familiar with the layout, I wasn't overly familiar with the car, and I'd not actually driven that car and track combo before. And one of the things that everybody says about higher end wheels is that it helps you find the limit faster than one of the lower end wheels. So I went in absolutely cold, no practice at all. I basically jumped in, stock set up, went around there and hit some laps, and here are the results of that particular session. And as you can see here, the first lap, don't worry about the first lap because it actually times your out lap and all the time you sat in the pits. So obviously I was in the pits for a little bit there. So forget about that lap, and we're going to look from lap 2 all the way through to lap 10, which is that 9 lap run I was talking about. And as you can see with the G27, jumped in 120.9 just about second time round, went a little bit slower on the second lap there, and then throughout the rest of it, despite a little mistake there on lap 8 that cost me 3/10 in the last turn, you basically just got slowly, incrementally quicker all the way throughout it, which is generally the way that car behaves. It starts out on cold tyres and it takes a little while to sort of warm up and get going, especially as I was running the endurance tyres on this one as well. So as the fuel started to burn off and as the tyres started to come in, it just gets incrementally quicker as you go along. So the average lap time for that particular session, if we have a look at this graphic here, the average lap was 1 minute 20.1491, and the total time, which is an important factor as well to take into account when you're racing, of course, 12 minutes 1 second 0.3420. Alright, so following doing this, as I said, I unplugged all my old gear and set up my new wheel and pedals, and obviously I'd been using the G27 for about 4 years, so it wasn't fair for me to just jump in cold. So I basically jumped in. I deliberately did not run that car and track combination. I played around with a whole bunch of other stuff just to get used to the wheel and tweak the settings and get everything to exactly the way I like it, in the same way as I have done over the past 4 years with the G27, and just to really get a feel for it, because it's not something that you're probably going to pick up, just put it on the standard settings and just run it and you're just automatically going to be faster. It's something different, so it is going to take you a little while to settle in. So I spent a week just doing other stuff, tweaking the settings, etc., and getting it just right. And then over the weekend just gone, I came in, once again, I hadn't done any sim racing at all that day. I came in completely cold, no practice, with the DD1 Club Sport pedals, and ran the same Porsche Kyalami in the identical weather conditions. And this is what I came up with for the lap times. So as you can see there, forget the first lap once again, but the second lap started out with a 120.316, which is around about half a second, just over half a second faster than my first lap out of the pits with the G27. And then as time went on, despite the fact that I did make one small error there on the sixth lap, it's just incrementally faster, pretty much exactly the same as with the G27, just got incrementally better and better, as I say, the nature of that car seems to be. But it's when you pull up the average laps, and if we have a look on this graphic here, average laps, the total time is 11 minutes 53.972 seconds, and the average lap 1 minute 19.3302. The best lap is also just under a second faster with the new wheel. So when you actually take that into a race context, I mean, if that was a 9-lap race that we were doing there, I would have been 7 seconds up the road, 7 or 8 seconds, 8 seconds just about up the road with the better wheel and with the new wheel and pedals. And yeah, that's obviously absolutely huge. Now, in terms of the actual results of that, I definitely can't promise that my previous, because the new wheel was done with the second run, so I guess in a way I was already sort of familiar with the car and the way it behaved on the track and everything like that. I definitely can't promise that that didn't come into play, although I tried to reduce it as much as possible by going in completely cold on both occasions, not having done any sim racing earlier on either of the days that I ran it. So that was as close as I could get to actually replicating it, I suppose, in those conditions, but I obviously cannot definitely rule out the fact that I had a little bit better car and track knowledge as a result of my earlier run with the G27. But either way, that's significant. Yeah, I think everyone would agree that's a significant difference. So for me, I think definitely looking at this, you can conclude that, at least in my case, this higher end gear did make me faster. And as I've said at the beginning of the video, that's not going to be the case for everyone, depending on what type of driver you are and how reliant you are on that kind of feedback. But for me, it's definitely made me quicker. On iRacing, I've been tweaking around with the settings a little bit, and I'm still not completely happy with it. I will say that there's a league race that runs a race once a month that I've actually won the last 2 races with my G27. I came out with the new wheel and I crashed on lap 3. Although I'm not 100% sure that the wheel was to blame. I think it's possibly just a mistake on my end as well. But it's not it's far from a silver bullet and a fix-all, but looking at the raw data here, where I've tried to make a direct comparison, it's fairly unequivocal, isn't it? It does look as though it's certainly helped improve my pace at the very least. Now, to put it all down to the direct drive wheel would be completely wrong. The V3 pedals, the Fanatec pedals that I've got here as well, the brake pedal is much, much nicer to use than my G27 pedals. And if you remember my old video about the load cell, because I did a load cell modification on those pedals, and that was a huge improvement to the original stock standard pedals. This is like another level again, because the brake pedal just feels so nice and intuitive to use. And I think that definitely a part of that gain that you can see there is down to the better quality of the pedals. So it's certainly not all just down to the direct drive wheel. The other thing that you notice with a direct drive wheel, and this is something that I've was fairly not really conscious of, but it's something I've become conscious of, is that with the G27, of course, being very limited in the amount of torque it can only produce about 2.4 newton meters of torque, I think. And you tend to find that you're hanging onto the wheel quite tightly to make sure that you feel all those little bits and pieces as well as you possibly can, all the smaller little things. With the direct drive wheel, if you hang on to it that way, because this thing, the DD1 can produce 20 newton meters of torque, and the Simucube and the DD2 from Fanatec, and they can produce even more than that. So you find that if you try and hold on to it and fight every little bump the way that you do with the G27, you're going to wind up with tennis elbow on both your elbows. It's because it's just a tremendous strain on your arms and wrists and everything else. So you actually learn to do something which is much more akin to what you do in a real car, which is actually relax your forearms quite a lot and your wrists, and not grip it so tight, because you don't need to grip it really tightly to feel all the little bumps and everything, because it's doing such a good job of transmitting that feedback through the wheel in any case. So you tend to find that you're relaxing your forearms and your wrists a lot more, and that's obviously better for longer stints at the wheel if you're into your endurance racing and stuff like that. So that's actually going to help keep you fresher over a long stint. Just being able to get that feedback a lot easier with a lot less, I guess, physical effort and concentration from yourself to pick up every little detail. So that's another point to consider as well. I'll be interested to see, once I get everything tweaked down for iRacing, whether it has the same effect over there as well. I did an oval race, a stock car race last week with it, which was actually my first race with the new wheel and pedals, and it was at a track that I'm normally awful at, which is Martinsville. I really have trouble under the brakes at Martinsville, and in this particular race I was running right up the front the whole time, and I really do think that the new brake pedal had a lot to do with that, because of just the way that I was able to brake into the turns and so on. So I guess now the verdict's over to you guys. It's definitely your money if you decide that you want to make an upgrade, or if you have had an upgrade and you found some sort of different result to what I've found. Definitely let us know in the comments. But yeah, I guess the first thing to do is figure out whether or not you really feel as though you're missing out on the feel that you require to get the best out of yourself on the sim racing, and then of course decide if it's worth spending the money for yourself to go out and get it. But I can certainly say, looking at the data, I mean, it even surprised me how big the gap was. But certainly for me, it's definitely helped make me faster. So over to you. Hope this helps for anybody who's kind of asking themselves a question. If you've got any other further questions, just let me know in the comments as well, and I'll do my best to answer them. All right, so that's it for me. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.